"100 years before anyone had heard the term near-death experience, we actually have a recorded case of a young Persian man who clearly had a near-death, out-of-body experience. Subsequently, he had telepathic experiences, he developed faith-healing capabilities, experienced incidents of clairvoyance, and had episodic prophetic dreams. The story begins in 1863 in southern Persia, when a father who was a scholar of Islamic law had a prescient dream. In the dream, he saw Abraham, the father of the Abrahamic faiths, in the form of a child, sitting on his lap, and suddenly he transformed into an adult, overpowering the father. Abraham told him that he wished to be part of the man's family. When he woke up after long meditation, he interpreted his dream as meaning he would have a son with a great destiny. That same year, a son was indeed born, and as the newborn, washed and bundled, was handed over to him, he kissed the baby and gave him his first feeding, which by custom was a dab of honey and butter. In amazement, he kept staring at the newborn as it resembled the child he'd seen in his dream. As a result, he named his son after the prophet Abraham, who had appeared in his dream, and chose the name Muhammad-Ibrahim. He came to be known as Fadl. In school, he was a prodigy. At 9, he began to learn Arabic and mastered it in 3 years. By the time he was 20, he had mastered Islamic studies, philosophy, and science. His talent and genius did not escape the dignitaries. The governor of Shiraz also owned the school where Fadl had boarded and studied, and he was keen to arrange a marriage between Fadl and his wife's younger sister. As a result, he often gave him precious gifts, furniture, and expensive bound books, always mentioning that he had everything he needed except a bride. But marriage was the last thing on his mind. After exhausting the traditional fields of study, he became captivated by the mystery of how one becomes a prophet. At that point in his life, Fadl believed that all the prophets of God were ordinary human beings, but exceptionally accomplished. So he sought to discover what it took to become a prophet. At first, he settled on knowledge and studied excessively, but eventually became distraught, realizing his attachment to books was an obstacle and not the answer. In deep despair, it occurred to him that maybe the obstacle was his physical body. In his zeal to achieve prophethood, he sought to find a way to detach his spirit from his body. Just as Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad had retreated from civilization to commune with the Spirit. One afternoon, Fadl left his school and began to walk away from the city of Shiraz into the wilds outside the city. His sojourn, however, was not to last long. Just as the sun was setting, out of nowhere, a pack of vicious stray dogs came towards him. Panicked, Fadl ran away as fast as his feet would take him, but he tripped and hit his head severely and knocked himself unconscious. As a result, he had some sort of a near-death or out-of-body experience. Suddenly, Fadl found himself on top of a nearby tree, watching with disgust his lifeless body on the ground. Then in a flash, he ascended higher to a delightful realm, but suddenly remembered his body and returned to check it. Again, he was repulsed by his body, and then ascended even higher, trying to get as high as he could. All of a sudden, he heard a voice. "Fadl, this is your station and no higher." Fadl stated that when he looked around, it was the most beautiful and breathtaking scene. way beyond description. Then the voice resounded again. Fadl, you are rushing. Your time has not come. You must return to your physical form. And only after perfecting yourself, at the age of 72, shall you ascend to your station. Well, that was it. Suddenly he found himself sitting up in the meadow, and the morning sun was shining. He located his turban and shoes, and returned to town. By the way, he did eventually die at the age of 72, just as he had been told in the spiritual realm. His quest wasn't over yet. He thought to himself, why not try suffering with self-denial and a life of seclusion? First, he avoided meat and prayed constantly. Then, he decided more suffering was necessary. When the governor used to throw a banquet for the theological students, Fadl would not attend. Then, he decided that it was not true suffering because it was not actually seeing the food. It would be more meritorious if he attended the banquet and practiced self-denial there. So, at such banquets, he would pass the delicious dishes and limit himself to only bread and vegetables. Well, still no trumpet blast appointing him as a prophet, but he did attain a certain level of clarity of vision and purity of heart. In those days, there was a mystic from Shiraz who had left his home and wealth to escape the cruelty of the previous governor. He was living in an isolated room by an old cemetery, not too far from Shiraz. A few dervishes had joined him as their leader. This mystic man, being a psychic, sensed Fadl's inner yearning and sent one of his followers to invite Fadl for a visit, so he could guide him to all truth. The messenger visited Fadl, pretending he wanted Fadl to write a letter for him. But Fadl sensed the ruse and told him it's simply an excuse and asked, "What are you really here for?" The messenger extended the invitation of the mystic leader. This mystic man had seen Baha'u'llah when he had withdrawn to the seclusion of the mountains of Sulaymaniyah. For those not familiar with the Baha'i faith, Baha'u'llah is the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith, and at one time he had withdrawn from civilization for about 2 years and lived as a dervish in the mountains of Sulaymaniyah. So, back to the story. Fadl arrived at the forsaken room where the dervishes had gathered. The leader was not there. After an hour or so, he saw a holy appearing man with a long white beard, dressed in the garb of the dervishes, returning from the desert. He was the mystic leader. Although he did not utter a word, through telepathy, he communicated with Fadl. For about a year, Fadl, off and on, attended such meetings. And a few times the mystic man brought to Fadl's mind the appearance of the central figures of the Baha'i faith, the Bab, Baha'u'llah, and Abdu'l-Baha. Was this mystic man a Baha'i? We'll never know. After a year, the mystic finally spoke in words and said, "You have reached the stage of completion." One of the gifts he got from this mystic was the knowledge of faith healing. Fadl then headed home and asked his father to send him to the holy cities in Iraq to further his learning. His father, as usual, went along with whatsoever his Persian son requested and provided the means. For 2 years he studied there and received the equivalent of a doctorate. One night in a dream, Fadl heard a voice saying, "The goal of your heart is in Khorasan, which is a province in northeast Iran." The next morning, Fadl took off on foot with very little provisions. It took him 6 months to get there. The provincial capital of Khorasan is the city of Mashhad. Of the 11 imams, only one is buried in Iran, and he is the Imam Rida, who is buried in Mashhad. There, Fadl dreamt that in the company of Imam Rida, he went to the celestial world, where he saw God with two heavenly beings, one on each side. One of them, on behalf of God, gave Fadl a very heavy book to correct. Fadl said, "The book is too large, and I don't have enough time." He was told to keep the book, and that eventually he would do it. Then he woke up. About 2 months later in the dream, he saw one of the prophets telling him that in his life he will find the source of all truth, and the way will be shown to him in his own little home village of Persia. He literally crisscrossed vast distances to be guided by dream after dream. In the middle of the hot summer, he tackled the dusty road on foot again, traversing mountains and deserts to return to his village. Imagine how happy his parents were to see their lost son, as they had not heard from him for almost a year. Everybody from far and near came to visit the pride and joy of the family. In that village, there was another Islamic scholar, who was the rival of Fadl's father. Pretending friendliness, he also came by and paid them a visit. As customs were, every visit had to be repaid. At his earliest convenience, Fadl went to pay his respect to that scholar. He entered the house and sat nearly half an hour, but there was no sign of him. When he did show up, his desperate look indicated something was wrong. Apologizing for the delay, he stated that his only daughter was ill, with no hope of recovery. Fadl for the first time used the gift of faith healing, which had been given to him by the mystic man of Shiraz. He asked for paper, pen, and ink. On each of the four corners, he wrote Abbas in separate letters. Abbas is, by the way, the given name of Abdu'l-Baha, a central figure in the Baha'i faith. He told the grieving father to soak the paper in water and give that water to his daughter to drink. Fadl left the house. To everyone's surprise, the girl's fever broke and she recovered. Thrilled with the miraculous recovery of his daughter, he approached Fadl's father to put the past behind him and begin a union. He said he had pledged to God that whoever could cure his daughter, he would give her in marriage to him. Fadl's father was delighted about such a proposal. In beauty and wealth, that girl was matchless. And more than that, it would stabilize the roaming life of his son. He presented Fadl with the proposal, which he accepted. The preparations for that wedding were the talk of the town. For the first time, the whole village was happy about such a union between rival families. The very last step for the wedding was sending the ring and special items to the bride's house. The night before this took place, Fadl had yet another dream in which he heard a voice repeating 3 times, "Do not get married. It will be an obstacle." Before sunrise, Fadl was on his horse, speeding away with no trace. Imagine the effect on everyone, particularly the bride and her family. No doubt, the war of rivalry intensified worse than ever. After some time, a merchant friend of Fadl's family, while traveling in Persia, a port city by the Persian Gulf, sighted Fadl and immediately notified his father. The father communicated with Fadl that if his sudden departure was to avoid the wedding, he should return home, as it had been called off forever. So Fadl returned home. Fadl had had another dream in his youth. In that dream, he saw a young man handing him a book and telling him, "Your answer is in this book." In those days, the houses of the divines were open to the public, and knocking was not required to enter. One afternoon, while Fadl was alone at home meditating on his past and his endless chain of dreams, he heard a knock on the door. This was unusual, as knocking was not necessary. He approached the door and said, "Who is it?" A pleasant voice answered, "It is me." That voice had an unusual effect upon Fadl. Possibly it sounded like the voice of the youth in his dream, handing him a book. Fadl asked, "Who do you want?" The answer was, "You, the Fadl. Aren't you Shaykh Muhammad-Ibrahim?" Then at the doorway, Fadl found a young man who appeared to be just arriving at the village. Fadl asked, "Where are you from?" He said, "I'm from Shiraz, and I'm on my way to Persia." Fadl helped him take his horse to the stable and showed him in. The young man brought his saddlebag with him into the house. They spent the rest of the day covering every subject except religion. He spent the night as Fadl's guest. After breakfast, Fadl could not contain his curiosity any longer. Fadl said, "May I ask, with these locks, how much gold are you carrying?" The traveler answered, "I have something much more precious than gold." Fadl asked, "Like what?" The answer, "It is a book." "May I see it?" Fadl asked. The traveler unlocked the bag and reverently took out the Book of Certitude, kissed it, and handed it to Fadl. For those of you not familiar with the Baha'i faith, Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the faith, revealed the Book of Certitude, also known as the Kitab-i-Khan, in the span of 2 days and nights in Baghdad in the early 1860s. The book addresses various theological themes, such as the nature of God and his manifestations. So, back to our story. The traveler said, "While I go to the market to buy some provisions, you may read it, but I shall be leaving after lunch." Fadl pleaded with him to stay longer, but the answer was no. The traveler left for the market. Fadl then instructed the cook to make a special lunch and also some additional food for the traveler to take with him on his journey. After lunch, the traveler prepared for leaving. Fadl begged him to leave the book for a short while, because in that short span of time, he had barely scanned the book's 200 pages. The guest replied, "This is my only true wealth, and I cannot part with it." He did, however, give Fadl copies of some tablets and the long daily prayer for Fadl to keep. None of these writings or the book had any indication about the author. Soon, Fadl accepted the divine origin of what he read and memorized the long daily prayer, reciting it every day for the rest of his life. After reading those writings, the style of his speech showed such obvious changes that everyone recognized the influence of the young traveler as possibly causing Fadl to become a Baha'i. Some family members now consider Fadl to be a disgrace to the family. When a deranged and vile member of Fadl's own family attempted 3 times to kill him, Fadl's mother begged him to escape the danger. His father obviously had mixed feelings, but the love of his mother prevailed over the misgivings about him being a Baha'i. Fadl decided to leave his home and his enemies behind. He traveled to the center of Islamic learning once again. For 2 years in the holy city of Najaf, Fadl taught classes in philosophy, incorporating much of the divine philosophy he acquired from reading those tablets given to him by the young traveler in his hometown. These new ideas proved to be very appealing to his theological students. All the while, he was constantly on the lookout for the object of his quest. Finally, he discovered the source and immediately prepared to make a pilgrimage to Akka, the prison city across the bay from Haifa, in what is today Israel. The next day, he joined the caravan and walked all the way to the Holy Lands. We're only halfway through his adventurous story, but it's too much for one video. But I want you to know that he made it safely to the Holy Lands and spent 4 months with Abdu'l-Baha. I'll leave you one final adventure from his caravan that involves another dream and a dramatic bit of faith healing. At one stop, the caravan leader decided to camp for 2 nights. As Fadl awoke after a poor night's sleep on the hard ground, he spotted a village in the distance and went to buy some provisions. As he entered the village, the headman walked towards him, bowed in respect, and called him an angel. Fadl was at a loss about the whole thing, and he was sure that the headman had mistaken him for someone else. The headman spoke. "Last night, I saw you in my dream, exactly as you are, and here you are in the flesh. My daughter is in serious trouble. For a number of days, a leech has attached itself to her throat, and now she is constantly spitting blood, and her throat is closing. No one in the village has been able to remove the leech. In my despair last night, I cried and prayed hard for relief. When I fell asleep, in my dream, you were shown to me as the one who could cure her. I beg you to come to my house and do something." As an aside, this is actually possible in people and animals. A tiny leech from a vegetable can attach itself to the lining of the mouth or throat, and it will not let go until it's completely gorged with blood. So, back to the story. Fadl, quite bewildered, started to walk with the headman toward his house, trying hard to think of what he should do. Suddenly, the answer came to him. Use the same prescription of writing Abbas on each corner of a paper and washing the ink. When they arrived, he did not even have to examine the patient. He told the headman, "I will write a prayer prescription, and your daughter must drink the water of the ink. But in return, I want you to provide me with a mattress, so I can sleep for a few hours. I am part of a caravan camped nearby, and have not had a good night's sleep." It worked. The daughter drank the ink water and coughed up the gorged leech. Meanwhile, Fadl fell into a deep sleep on a mattress in the large room of that house. After a couple of hours, the murmuring of a crowd woke him up. Barely opening his eyes, he saw the room was filled with people of every affliction, all having a slight gift with them, expecting a cure. The headman was hushing them to stay quiet so the angel could sleep. Soon Fadl realized that the courtyard was also filled with deformed, blind, or paralyzed people. He began to worry that he could never make it back to the caravan. As soon as he stood up, people swarmed towards him, but were kept back by the headman's attendants. Fadl asked the headman to come close to him. Fadl whispered in his ears, "I will write a number of prescriptions, leaving them with you, only under the condition that you distribute them after I have cleared the village, or I will miss my caravan." He did exactly that and took a few gifts with him, but left without the provisions he had helped to buy. Finally, I want to let you know that I came across this remarkable story while listening to an excellent talk given by the late Dr. Darius Shahrokh, entitled Fadl-i-Shirazi, Guided by Dreams, from his Windows to the Past series, which was first published in 1992. All credit for the contents of this video goes to him. Check the description box for a link, and you can hear the rest of the story from Dr. Darius Shahrokh himself.
Your actions do actually have quite an impact, even if you don't know it. And think about this. If you like videos and then actually like them on YouTube, it helps other people to find them. So flap your butterfly wings and please like this video.